Hello everyone, I'm Matt Little and we're going to talk about the basics of one-handed shooting with a pistol. So one thing you have to realize when you're shooting one-handed with a pistol is that the primary way I mitigate recoil and my trigger press to remove any movement in the muzzle when I shoot the gun is through my support hand. So everyone is going to introduce some movement into the pistol when they pull the trigger. And this hand normally helps me prevent that through a strong grip on this hand. This hand also does the bulk of the work for recoil management because I can grip the gun stronger with it because I don't have to worry about the trigger finger being able to move. On this hand, I can't grip any harder than I can while still leaving this trigger finger relaxed and able to pull the trigger in a precise manner, right? So if I grip too hard with one hand, or if I grip too hard with my strong hand when I'm shooting, I'm going to wind up not being able to shoot fast because this finger is going to be tense as well. And it's also going to affect my accuracy. So if I can only grip so hard with the support hand without affecting the accuracy of the recoil, and also if you notice there's a gap here around the gun, so now the gun's going to tend to recoil this way, and that also affects my recoil control, right? So if I can only do so much when I'm shooting one-handed for recoil management and working the trigger, I have to work the trigger more carefully and I have to be very particular about how I hold the gun, right? So there's a couple different options you need to experiment with when you're holding the gun one-handed for shooting. One is the position of this thumb, right? Some people bring the thumb high and get an extra kind of pinching effect on their grip to help control the recoil. Some people lock this thumb down when they're shooting one-handed and they get a good effect on the recoil management and on preventing that movement in the muzzle from the trigger finger by using this thumb. My personal option when I'm shooting strong hand only is actually between the two. I let the thumb just kind of raise forward like this, just a little bit lower than it would be if I had the other hand on the gun. But this depends on your hand shape, your hand size, and also to some degree, the way you think about shooting, right? Your psychology also factors into this. So you need to try all three techniques and see which one works best for you. The other thing I have to remember is that if I press too much with my little finger as I'm shooting the gun, it's called milking the grip. See all the movement I'm getting in the muzzle now? I'm going to drastically affect my accuracy, especially when I'm shooting fast. So I try to think of these two fingers doing the bulk of the work and kind of let this one be a little more relaxed, and that helps me prevent that milking the grip effect. So I grip harder with these two and less with this one, and I try to totally relax the trigger finger. The other thing I want to do is with my thumb, and like I said, I put the thumb kind of parallel to the ground, but this is the same if you have the thumb high or low. I'm trying to help hold the gun and keep it from moving with pressure from this part of my thumb pressing into the gun. I don't want to steer the gun with it. What I want to do is kind of make a wall that prevents the gun from moving any further than where I have the thumb. So when I press the trigger when I'm shooting the gun one-handed, I have to be more deliberate on the trigger than I would be if I had this hand to help me manage the movement of the gun. This is why you can't shoot as fast one-handed as you can with both hands on the gun. Now, I don't have to be overly deliberate, right? I don't necessarily have to shoot it like I'm shooting a bullseye match, but I definitely want to do more of like a prep and press type trigger pull rather than slapping the trigger, which is something I can get away with when I'm shooting fast with both hands. The other factor here that you need to think about is the alignment of the gun with the forearm. So when I shoot with both hands, neither one of my forearms is directly behind the gun because I have to have the gun in that triangle between my shoulders and my arms, right? But the grip doesn't change. I don't move this hand on the gun when I take this hand off of it. But what does happen is rather than being like this, like it is when I shoot two-handed, the arm extends and now the wrist is directly behind the bore of the gun, which helps me both be more accurate and control the recoil. So the hand doesn't change, but the arm does. The arm moves so that the wrist is directly behind the gun and so is the forearm. Now, there's also several different options, I should say, for how you run this. Some people like to cant the gun when they shoot one-handed. I actually don't recommend that unless you're shooting very fast at very close targets. It is a faster way to shoot, but the recoil impulse is going to be different than if I'm holding the gun straight up and down. So I prefer to keep the gun straight up and down. Now, some people say to blade when you shoot one-handed. I will only do that on the most difficult shots. Otherwise, I don't want to have to shift my position and take myself out of that natural, relaxed, athletic stance where I can move in any direction. It's more awkward to move from this position than it is from here. So I'll extend the arm so that the wrist is behind it, but I'm not going to blade unless it's a very difficult shot. One other important consideration when you're shooting with one hand is what you do with the other hand. Now, obviously, if you're shooting with one hand because you're injured, you may not be able to change its position. It may just be hanging loose because of the injury. But whenever possible, I want to bring that arm in, kind of still relaxed, still natural and fluid, but tucked into my chest. So rather than having the hand behind the back or relaxed at the side, or the old school PPC way of putting the hand in the pocket, I want to bring the hand in right here. Now, the reason for that is it makes it easier for me to move, and it also avoids this arm affecting my center of balance as I'm trying to shoot. Now, obviously, if I'm capable with this arm, if it's not injured too badly, when I move, I want to be able to move the arm as I'm running. But as I shoot, I'm still going to bring it back to this position. So the preferred position, if it's possible based on the context of your circumstances, I want to have the hand still relaxed, but nice and tight here against the chest as I shoot. All right. Now that we've gone over all the ways to do this and the things you need to experiment with and check out for yourself, I'm going to go live and I'm going to demonstrate shooting the gun one-handed. And that's the basics of how to shoot the gun one-handed. When you work on this on your own, make sure you experiment with the different factors of like the thumb on the grip, blading, canting, how you stand, all of those things, and find the way that works best for you to shoot the gun.